hopefully we'll get Dave and Maureen on here shortly. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Here.
Seth Engelborg.
Here.
Erisman here. Ian Golding.
Here.
And then we have Joe Topham.
Here.
Waiting on a few. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson.
Affirmative.
Okay. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. We have Rachel Freeman. You can hear.
Hi, sorry to be late.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I've had some trouble with my microphone, so if for some reason you can't hear me tonight, let me know, please.
Okay. Yeah, it does seem like there might be a little bit of a delay or something, but we could definitely hear you. Maureen, we could hear you sign in, so welcome.
Well, thank you.
We have Jean Crouch.
I'm here.
And Tori Brown.
Here.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address questions and comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So with that, we will open the meeting with public comment. Jeff, do we have any public comment? Okay, so we will begin with Town of Nantucket DPW town-wide. And I'm not sure which representative from the town would like to take this. Rob, would you like to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to open now that we have this meeting here, knowing that we're going to need to continue tonight without final input from Natural Heritage, but that we spent a lot of time speaking with the division and particularly with Dave Paulson. I've gotten a lot of really good back and forth established, and looking forward to ultimately closing and establishing a path forward. But I just would like to take this opportunity to say this general notice of intent is the town's and the department's best step forward to be able to work together with the commission to identify what it is we do on an annual basis, to continue to continue to keep the lines of communication open, and to refine ultimately the orders and the rules of engagement that the town will abide by. I look forward to having this as a living, breathing document that our staff will seek and will be trained in to be able to improve everything that we provide for service with an eye towards the environment, and to have the commission along with us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jean and to Tori and try to answer any questions that the commission or anyone else might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Jean, would you like to take over?
Yes, thank you very much. I first want to say I seem to be having some connectivity issues. Oh, can you still hear me? Because I just went blank for a minute.
Yeah, we can hear you okay at this
Okay,
point.
good. I've turned everything off that I can possibly turn off to try to reduce my bandwidth, but I may drop off, unfortunately. And I apologize for that. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity of outside your normal hearing schedule. It's an important project for the town, and we very much appreciate the fact that the commission is giving us your full attention on this project. We have, as Rob mentioned, been working diligently with Natural Heritage. We've had a number of calls and passing information back and forth with them, and I think we're very close to agreement with them, at which time that they can provide us with a letter of a no-take letter for this project. And we're probably maybe in a week or two, we should be able to get that letter, I'm hoping. And I just want to reiterate to the commission that what we're proposing to do here is for work in buffer zone only, and in floodplain, if that floodplain also extended out into a road or a bike path area. We're not looking to actually alter a resource area, a wetland, a stream, that sort of thing, coastal beach. We're just looking to do maintenance activities in the vicinity of resource areas, not so much work in actual resource areas. We feel that the interests from Natural Heritage, there's a lot of priority habitat on Nantucket, as you all probably know, and we're going to be in a lot of that where it crosses over these roads in the project area. And I think the interests that Natural Heritage has and that we've negotiated with them or worked through with them are going to serve the Conservation Commission as well in your interests. So that's why we're looking forward to getting this thing finalized with Natural Heritage. And copies of the document have been provided to you. I hope you've gotten copies of them all. And if you would like to walk through that, we'd be more than happy to do that. I'll leave it up to you what comments or questions you all might have.
I think we've had plenty of time to review this, so we can probably just start with questions to you, unless you have kind of a shortened idea of a presentation you want to say.
I don't think so. Not any more than what we've already provided. I think if you wanted to walk through the spreadsheet, that would be fine.
So sorry, you would like to walk through the spreadsheet?
No, I was like going to turn it over to you. If you had questions about the material in the spreadsheet, we'd be happy to address that.
Perfect, thank you. So at this point, do any commissioners have questions or comments for any of our representatives? Looks like no. I know I had a question, and it's kind of has to do with all the town properties, but is somewhat outside of this scope, I think. But I guess have some concerns about like some of the main roads that we have, and I'll use Pulpus Road as an example, that really bisect a lot of wetlands and wetland buffers and resource areas. And I don't know that there's enough maybe notification to the public about these resource areas. And I guess what I mean is like wildlife crossing signs. And I know signs is like an unhappy thing on Nantucket, but when you have a road like Pulpus that's windy and people can go 40, so they're really going 45, you know, I'm just wondering if there can be some addition by the DPW to, again, like notify people that they are in critical habitat and to watch out for wildlife. I know that was not phrased very well, but that's kind of my question.
So I guess just to clarify, Madam Chair, are we talking about requesting additional signs?
Well, I mean, like, again, as Pulpus Road as an example, there are so many wetlands that road goes through, and with a speed limit as high as 40, people are really going 45 or 50, and they don't slow down for wildlife. And there really aren't signs saying, hey, turtles cross here. You know, there aren't a lot of them anyway, when we're really close to the wetlands. And I just don't know if there's some way either to reduce the speed limit in areas where you're going through critical habitat, or to make signage that, you know, tells people they should be slowing down in some of these areas, or at least on the lookout.
So I would simply say that particularly Pulpus and Wawinut, those two areas have been identified as being underserved by the terrestrial critters from these habitats crossing back and forth. And I might have mentioned at an earlier meeting, the department has taken a proactive approach in doing a full inventory of our existing cross culverts along those corridors. And we are currently underway with a complete replacement program for every one of the 23 or 24 cross culverts along that specific corridor, with lots of sensitive and habitat and resources. The intent of that program is to recognize all the species involved and to provide adequate passage, both for hydrology as well as the hydraulics, and for the critters involved in that corridor. You know, the one thing that we don't see a lot of here is species that are typical, other than, as you mentioned, the turtles. And frankly, and you may see more than I, but here it's mostly deer that are subject to the regular vehicular hits. I haven't seen a lot of turtles dead in the street, but we've seen a lot of rabbits and a lot of mammals, you know, the rabbits and the turtles, which are certainly overpopulated. But we're certainly keeping that in mind. I don't know if signage would be the appropriate application to that. I think getting these underrepresented and underserved the correct infrastructure to allow them safe passage is probably the best way to move forward on that.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I do like when it's turtle crossing season, Pulpus Road is pretty bad for the turtle hits, including like large snapping turtles that people just run right into which is pretty sad. But maybe when I drive, I'll try and get some better ideas because I agree signs everywhere maybe aren't the way, but I think maybe reducing the speed limit is on a road that's so windy with so many wetlands and resource areas. I think I'm probably somewhat alone in thinking this, but it's definitely a concern of mine when we're talking about clearing sight lines and really clearing out some of the vegetation, but we're not slowing down the traffic to kind of acknowledge that they're going through these critical areas. But that's kind of my only question at this point. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for raising this point. I certainly agree with the chair that reptile and amphibian crossing roads are certainly an issue. I've seen many turtles and snakes be run over, but I think if the DPW is committed to, reviewing all of the culverts and connections in a holistic island-wide approach, and is going to get natural heritage input on that, and I'm assuming Conservation Commission input on that as well. To me, having those structures being designed as they really need to be ecologically is going to be way better than anything we can do with signage or speed limits. I mean, I think in the short term, doing some of those interventions might help a bit. But if the DPW is actually going to commit to, alternative strategies and ecologically inspired design, that would be awesome for the island.
Thank you for that perspective, Seth. Any other comments or questions from commissioners about the DPW submission? Maureen, and then I'll go back to Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the one thing as I was going through the detailed plans that in terms of actual monitoring reports, there's going to be, obviously you're doing a lot of monitoring, but in terms of providing reports of kind of what is happening, do we have a mechanism for the monitoring reports to go to the NRD, on a regular basis, or so that we're aware if you're seeing changes or what have you. And that was one thing about being able to have access to the monitoring reports. And the other is that I was looking to see, again, it's a reporting what's happening, but in terms of if emergency work is necessary in a resource area, that that we make it clear. I mean, it should be in this report, but I didn't see it explicitly, and I might have missed it, that again, the Natural Resources Department is notified immediately if emergency work needs to be done, so that we're working together right away. And that's, and obviously you've got procedures for something that needs to be done on an emergency basis, but I wasn't clear about how, what the mechanism would be for Jeff and his staff or the commission to find out. So those are my questions.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm
They're great
sorry.
questions. I don't know, Jean, were you trying to answer?
I was. I apologize. My internet keeps telling me I'm very unstable, and I've turned my video off to try to reduce my bandwidth to try to stay connected. What we're asking you to do is just maintenance activities. If there is an emergency circumstance that develops, there's no change in the emergency requirements that the DPW would have to involve notification of the commission and get approval. It also doesn't cover new work, like expansion work where something's made bigger, or it's a new project. That's a totally different situation from what we're asking to do. That would require notice of intent and go through the process the way any other project like that would. But relative to emergency action, it's the same process that would be taken that would be undertaken for any work that's actually in a resource area. That would be totally different.
Thank you, Jean. Maureen, did that answer your question? Oh, you're muted.
I guess maybe I should ask Jeff, is that in terms of the notifications that we have been getting, or is this an issue at all that you're concerned about in terms of us being involved right away when it's an emergency situation? And then I guess also maybe back to Jean, I'm not sure if what you said, would we get copies of monitoring reports as a matter of course? Is that useful? Have we gotten that before? Because you are doing a lot of monitoring. So I was just kind of wondering where that goes.
Thank you, brother. Jean, are you trying to answer again, and then we'll give it to Jeff?
Yeah. Relative to monitoring reports, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, we didn't, as part of this proposal, we weren't really talking about monitoring and then providing periodic reporting to the commission. When you say monitoring, what would you be thinking that would be monitoring?
Let's see.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Maureen, but even like just reporting the maintenance activities that you've done in some cases, so that we have kind of a record. But that might be off of what her question was.
Well, I mean, I was just trying to. Am I still good? Okay. I was just trying to get at that, and if there was, wait a minute, just let me look at my note again. Hang on. Yeah, I don't want to make this overly burdensome or anything, but you've got good requirements for what the DPW will be doing to assess. Does this culvert need you're going to look at it and see if it needs to have the sediment removed or fixed in some fashion, and I just don't know. If under this blanket thing, if that's in a resource, but it's standard maintenance, I guess I would think it would be good for us just to know that that's being done, that you found a condition that a culvert needed to be cleaned out or something, and you did that. And again, I'm not trying to produce more work for people, but it was just occurred to me that if we could have some sharing of information, but maybe Jeff, you've probably got a better idea of that. I was just, it was a general concern that I had.
Thank you, Maureen. I think Jeff might have at least some answer on how to condition this sort of reporting.
Yeah, and I'll say, excuse me, and with the land bank too, is I honestly think the two town employee groups that I probably hear from the most are probably Rachel and Rob. I mean, it's a pretty regular check-ins, a lot of text messages back and forth and things, but it's not as a concern, but I think it's something where we've looked at it is, I think if we were putting together an order of conditions, even if you just had something where, if it was just a notification that said, we're going to do a, kind of a 1 month look ahead, where it's a simple notice that says, hey, we're going to be out mowing the roadsides in the next 30 days. And then we know which ones are going to be there. And then just specifically something that says, if there's going to be work specific to a resource area, culvert cleaning or removal is a really great option, just to say, we just need notice to commission staff that that activity is going to be occurring. And trust me, I usually find out, because if they're out cleaning a culvert or doing that, someone inevitably calls just to say, hey, do you know someone's doing it? And they're pretty good about letting us know now. I know all the work on Pulpus Road for the works out by like Reyes Pond and things. We even met with Rob out on site before some of that maintenance to fix the one head hall that had collapsed had even occurred. So I feel pretty comfortable with it. I think with those built into the order, I don't think that's too much. I feel pretty comfortable, and I don't want to speak for Rob, but I feel like they probably know what their staff is going to be doing at least a little bit in advance, and just to send us we're going to be out mowing, or this is what the schedule is going to look like, even just to do it monthly or even every other month with kind of a 2-month look ahead. Obviously, those schedules fluctuate for weather and staff availability and things, and machinery that needs to be maintained. I don't think is a really heavy lift for anyone, and we're doing a lot of that already. So I think we can figure it out pretty easily.
Thank you, Jeff. Maureen, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Because I think then if we are getting, you'll be setting up your schedule anyway. And so if we get a copy of that schedule, when I say we, I mean, the department, if we get a copy of that schedule in advance, then, then Jeff can say, yes, we do know about that if someone calls. And, that would strikes me as it would be, since you have to have the schedule yourself, merely sending a copy to Jeff and his staff, that wouldn't be a whole lot of extra work. So that makes sense to me. So that I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. So Rob, I'll go to you, and then Seth and Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, Jeff said it well. The communication between departments has been strong, particularly in anything that we're trying to do or planning to do around a specific resource. What we're talking about on having coverage under the general notice of intent is really specific to the buffer zone work and not necessarily resource, but resource where it's allowed within the act, particularly with any kind of limited exemptions. So what does that mean? I mean, I think this is a real opportunity we've tried to be as comprehensive as possible, but it really is I look at it as a real opportunity to have the commission learn a lot more about the comprehensive nature of the activities that DPW is involved with, and to be able to come back, not just now, but in the future, with questions and comments along the way, to help us continue to refine and make sure that our program is as efficient as it can be, specific to protection of the environment in this particular case. So to that end, I think the reporting piece of this, or if we want to call it reporting, it's more about informing and informing as to what the DPW is up to, so that there are no surprises. And I feel like that is done in pretty short order by supplying those lists of activities, whether it's a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. What we're typically doing is developing these programs. They're annually done. We typically have seasonal activities that take place, as Jeff mentioned, as the weather allows us. And we're happy to provide that through the order.
Thank you, Rob. So Seth, I know you had your hand up a while ago.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate everything that's been said so far, with Rob being able to provide kind of like the upcoming notices to Jeff. But I would also like to see once a year, by the end of the calendar year, just an overview reporting document that says, here are all the activities we did, here's the number of hours that we spent on each activity, and here's the locations that we did them in, just so we can know more about what's happening at what place and what activity. And I am pretty sure that the DPW has to maintain those records for their staffing hours anyways. So it would be easy to just get us a compiled report. And then just one thing else, if the order of operations is wrong here, Ashley or Jeff, you can shut me off, but in the land banks proposal, they talked about a protocol for staff review of projects that were questionable as to whether they were considered maintenance or something else. And I'd like to see that same protocol being applied here, because there's some things that are really clearly maintenance, and there's some things that maybe more like repair or new work. And if the NRD staff is just looking at them and telling them which way to proceed, that would be great.
Thank you, Seth. That's a really good point to bring up. And I fully agree that we should add that component into this, into these conditions. So thank you. Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Seth has pretty much covered it. I mean, I assume that part of the reason we were talking about this earlier was that it would save Rob and Jeff from having to be in touch so frequently. And so my initial misgivings were that we would be ceding overview and regulatory authority, but it sounds to me from our discussions and from the document that that's not the case. So I agree with, I think Seth's point is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Rob?
Sure. So to that end, I would just say our work order system has only recently been updated to include hours for activities. Something we've added in the last couple of years, which has certainly helped from a management standpoint. However, I think the reporting system is not as specific as you may have been discussing. I just want to let you know, like we have the capabilities to print off summaries that list number of hours by task, but you would really have to spend a substantial amount of additional administrative time drilling into the locations of those activities that we do not currently do. Unless we're seeing things like reporting on which road we are grading the most frequently, things like that. And those are reports that I'm doing as a management tool, as opposed to something that is readily available. So I think there's some capability limitations within the systems that we currently utilize that I'm happy to work through as we review the order and conditions. And hopefully we have some latitude to be able to come back and talk reality with the commission.
Thank you, Rob. Jeff?
Yeah, I think especially because these are the first two kind of permits we've contemplated like this. I think having a condition that says, kind of at the close of the year, maybe, December or January, we just have the land bank and the DPW come and just check in and say, hey, these things were working for us, these things were not working for us, and kind of talk through about how to change out the permit or make adjustments if we needed to. If Rob comes back and says, our mowing program didn't really work the way we wanted it to, we need to make some adjustments to it. I think the whole purpose of this is to have that kind of, yearly check-in when it's a little quieter for everybody to say, these are the things that we need to change up, or maybe in the land bank's case, something to say, we've added on a property that we need to maintain. So we're going to need to amend our permit to include it or make some changes. So I think, while it may not be as super detailed as that, having everyone come and check in that one time a year, I think would probably solve that pretty easily.
Thank you, Jeff. Rob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing I'd like to add to that, just to give the commission sort of a heads up on how this process has been valuable, just even up to this point, involving my operational staff in the meetings with Dave Paulson from Heritage and discussing the various concerns and questions that they had prompted discussions like, hey, right now we're mowing a particular corridor a full 5 feet from the edge of pavement to the limit of brush. There's been back and forth about, how important that is. And is that a public perception thing? Is it a public safety thing? Is it a heritage, habitat or species thing? Like, where are the priorities? And one discussion point that came out of this was it would be far more efficient to use our 42-inch deck mower as a single pass. It's less than 4 feet. It gives safety for, people using their bikes. They don't have things that are hanging into the path per se. And there's sort of like 2 stages of mowing: a tight mowing up against the path, a little bit more allowance on the edge that gets done periodically, and then a hard brush line that gets maintained annually. And so that's the kind of thinking that our staff is bringing back to me, just based on this, recent interaction through this process, to go back and forth to really try to understand one another and to get at each other's real overarching goals. So I look forward to that kind of feedback. And just to follow up on what Jeff was saying, I think there's going to be ample opportunity in the next 3 years under coverage through this permit to have those kind of interactive discussions between the local commission and the department as well.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, I certainly understand the capability limitations on what software you're using. And I'm not asking for anything to be extremely explicit, just like a general overview would be helpful. And I think we could accomplish that in a document, or if Jeff thinks it's easier to be in a meeting, that's fine as well. Just building in a way in this permit to make sure that at least once a year we're reviewing what was done and what needs to change.
Thank you, Seth. And I definitely agree with you, because it would be good for us to quantify if certain locations on Nantucket are having greater impact or activity, than others, and then maybe try and address that. So I think that would be great. Mark?
I have a question for you, Ashley, or for Jeff. Is the permit forever? I was thinking a sunset issue. If we're concerned about giving sort of a carte blanche, could we do a sunset permit if necessary? Or, how do we address the problem if we're not liking how it's going? And don't get me wrong, I'm totally supportive of giving a island-wide permit to DPW, but what are the options if things aren't going perfectly?
So our permits are only 3 years, pending potential extensions. But Jeff probably has a better answer to that. This doesn't seem like a project that would be getting a certificate of compliance at the end. We would probably be extending, further for them to continue maintenance into the future. But Jeff, do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, I think you said that pretty well. Ashley, the one thing I would add that Mark asked about as well is if there's something going wrong, you still have the ability to issue any enforcement action. So you can enforce against the permit, you can enforce against a non-permitted activity. You certainly don't ever give up that right with any permit. And then that 3 years would apply. Again, you could extend it for 3 more. I think from talking with both groups, I think everyone hopes that, I think these yearly interactions would also lead to, at the end of the 3 years, hey, here's our new notice. We're going to do a complete update. We bought a new piece of machinery that does something totally different than what we did before. We're going to change these out, that you would be seeing these permits on at least that kind of 3 to 6 year basis to help make that make sense and not be carrying it on in perpetuity, certainly.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark, do you have a follow-up?
That gives me a lot of reassurance, Jeff, about the 3-year issue and enforcement. I've forgotten the 3-year part. I knew about enforcement, but I'm very appreciative of the cooperation and correspondence between the two departments, and that's going to make it work, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mark. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. To address Commissioner Beal's comments, simply put, I am interested as a director in involving the commission to a level that raises awareness of what we do, where we do it, and how we do it, so that when you get questions from the public, you are an informed commissioner that is able to answer those questions without having to say, I'm not really sure, or otherwise, and know that you've not just understood it, but provided meaningful feedback to improving that program. That's really my goal here. So I do understand the trepidation, but I'd say simply, I feel like we're all in this together. We all want to make sure that all the departments are, representing the island as best as possible. And you, as the regulators, truly know what's going on. So that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you, Rob. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think probably the best part of this whole meeting is hearing that Rob and Jeff and Rachel are all communicating, and to use Rob's words, a strong communication. I think that's really important, and I think if we know what's going on ahead of time, then we can all take a drive-by, check it out before and after, and then give our comments. I think that's really important. And Rob does not want to come back before us like Satchel Pond. Rachel does not want to come before us like the holly trees. So I think they've had experience. We've all worked together to correct a couple problems, and I think sadly those mistakes happened, but I think it's helped everyone in this group now really kind of work together and strive to make Nantucket better and just what's the best way to go forward. And I think that these applications really spell out a lot of steps that they can take and how to work better together. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joe.
Joe, thank you for bringing up two of the things that Rachel and Rob like talking about the least.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
I guess my apologies to Rachel and Rob.
Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this one? No. Okay, so if there's no other comments, Ian?
Well, with the greatest respect to Rob and Rachel, I mean, that is what we're not only trying to avoid going forward, but what we're worried about as commissioners. So, I mean, so Joseph, we all know what we're all talking about here. Thank you.
All right. So if there's no other comments or questions, it sounds like this needs to hold over for natural heritage input. And I know we need to continue to a date certain. Jeff, do we have this on a special meeting scheduled in the future, or will it be our next regular meeting?
So I guess just as a sense of the board, because I think this will help answer it, is, barring what natural heritage comes back with, it sounds like everyone is pretty comfortable with it. I was going to suggest moving it back onto the April the 8th CONCON meeting. It's our next regularly scheduled one. And if people are interested, I can even have kind of a framework of what maybe a draft order would look like for the project as well.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And it would be nice to see a draft order ahead of time, just because I have a feeling it'll be a lengthy one for us to review.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, Rob, if it's okay, we'll continue this until April 8th.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will see you guys next Thursday.
Okay.
All right. So with that,
Thank you very much.
thank you, Jean. and Tori as well for being on. So with that, we'll move on to Nantucket Island's Land Bank, all land bank properties, and we have Rachel Freeman on to represent this.
Hello. I want to thank you guys and the Conservation Commissioners for holding this special meeting to discuss, the myriad of projects that the Land Bank has and the DPW has, and the ongoing maintenance of our properties, so that we can move forward with, some assurance that we're in agreement that what is occurring on our properties is permitted and acceptable, and that the lines of communication are open. So first of all, I'm really happy that everyone took the time to be here today. This is exceedingly helpful. And I would like to just start by saying that I did submit additional information, and in some of the additional information that I submitted, one of the things that I pointed out was that during this whole process, one of the things that we figured out is that, almost every single spec of land bank property falls within either natural heritage or Conservation Commission jurisdiction. And so that means that we are, constantly permitting things. But I think the flip side of that, which is what I pointed out in my additional information, is that, it just goes to highlight how valuable environmentally the land bank property is. So it's something that we're always thinking about. It's something we're always keeping our eyes on. How do we meet the needs of the public while really being the best environmental stewards we can be? And it's a balance, but it's very, very important to us at the land bank. So I guess I would start there. And then I did discuss the idea of a staff approval process, or, a bit of a staff communication process, really allowing us to figure out what could be included as maintenance and what rose to the level of a notice of intent. And I think where I came up with that was in discussions with Jeff, because we went out to look at, I'm not sure, maybe 8 to 10 projects that we had proposed, a lot of which were maintenance, but maybe the maintenance was actually, over the 10% that the commission would necessarily consider maintenance, because I guess I'll say, because of the heavy usage of our properties and our infrastructure, it's not that common that we're just replacing 10% of something. It happens a lot where we just need to replace the whole thing. And it becomes a question as to whether or not this is maintenance or not. And the potential for replacing something that isn't changing doesn't come about all that often on private homeowners' properties, but I see it a lot on land bank property. We're not necessarily going to change anything about something, but a set of stairs or something like that, but it does need to just be, it's gone beyond the point of repair. So I think that's where we came up with the idea of staff approval. Is we went out with Jeff and Joanne and brought our field crew and our environmental staff, and we all went and looked at a whole series of different projects that we had. And we were able to basically say, Jeff was able to say, you know what, this one I think would be considered maintenance, but this one over here, because of, there's some design changes, or because I have concerns. There was one set of stairs that will be coming into permit where the dune has changed and the bank has changed such that in order to actually get the stairs out, there's some excavation needed, because some of them are a whole series of them are covered. So that was something, that arose as it would be better off filing that as a full notice. And I think for us and our field staff, it was exceedingly helpful to be able to have that site meeting. And then it just gave us some direction to go in. It was either one way or the other. So I think that was where we sort of originated with the staff approval process. And I think that the last thing I would like to say that I am completely open and on board with, yearly reports describing our activities. We also don't have any sort of tracking of hours that people spend on projects unless it is involved in a conservation permit for natural heritage, in which case we're often billing, quote unquote, billing out man hours or woman hours for the project. And so we have very, very clear records of how much time we've spent on that project. But that is a very small subset of what we do. On the flip side, I think it would be very easy for us to put together a calendar where we were able to say, what activities usually happen at which time of year, so that it could be anticipated, barring some sort of, I wouldn't even really call it, we don't really have emergencies like the DPW has emergencies. More of like occasional public safety issues. How about that for us? Which most often I think is definitely something we reach out to Jeff about. Everyone on my staff is pretty well aware at the land bank of the order of operations. One of the things we were able to do in the recent site visits was bring the new carpenter who was recently hired out on the site visits, and just have him listen to Joe and Jeff talk, introduce them, get an idea of how some of the permitting works, some of the resource areas, what he's going to be working in. We gave him the map of, all the different properties that fall within Natural Heritage or Conservation Commission permitting. And so basically you're going to have to call somebody anytime you want to do anything. So, so I feel like that was also a very, very helpful experience. And I think with that, I will ask if there's any, can I add one more thing? Sorry. We are not as far along in our Natural Heritage process. I have reached out to Natural Heritage, and we have gotten as far as they are looking for us to put polygons on a map of different areas that we're working on all our properties in GIS. And that's about as far as we got. So.
Thank you, Rachel. So it sounds like we'll be holding this one over as well.
Yes, please.
Are there any questions or comments on the land bank submission? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, I really support the staff review process because we don't want to get in an issue where the language is inflexible. Like the conditions change, and even if they don't change and you're just replacing all the boards of a walkway, let's say, we don't want to have to deal with like a ship of Theseus issue where if you replace the whole thing as a new structure, the same structure. So I like just having Jeff look at it. The one question I do have regarding the proposed Vista pruning locations, thank you kindly for supplying the photographs of all those areas. I noticed in many of the areas there's a high level of invasive or otherwise hardy non-native vegetation. So I was just wondering if any consideration is going to be done maybe to the time of year when those things are pruned, so that we're not spreading seeds and fruits of invasive species all around, which I'm sure the land bank doesn't want to do anyways.
Thank you for that question, Seth. Rachel, do you have a response?
I would say that we are maybe not as careful about time of year, but we're very careful about how we dispose of different material. Our staff is well versed in invasive species and is very clear about where things go. It's definitely something that we could work on in terms of planning our timing. I would hate to think that we would spread seed. And so I'm completely open-minded to that. A lot of our Vista pruning is done in the winter, in the off season, when oddly enough, we might be at the greatest risk for that. spreading of seed, but unless it's absolutely necessary, we really don't Vista prune during the growing season. But yes, we can be really careful about that and well aware. And when possible, choose the correct season to do so.
Thank you, Rachel. Seth, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just thank you. I know I saw things on there like bittersweet and honeysuckles and things like that. So I understand the staff has time to do the cutting in the fall, let's say, but if it could hold off until like January or February instead of October, it's going to be much better for minimizing the impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Seth. And I'm sure the land bank doesn't want to encourage more invasives on their properties, as it'll be a long-term kind of nightmare for them. So sounds like there's a way we can compromise here and time our prunes. All right, Joe?
So I didn't know if like a Gantt chart could be made or some spreadsheet or schedule that shows all the times when, I mean, I know weather kind of changes, pushes and pulls the schedule, but something that everyone could see and then we could all look at it like that makes sense for this pruning or maintenance of mowing the roads or whatever Rob's got to do. Something that we can all look at and really spells out the timeline for a year. Because it does seem like it's very routine every year. You're going to start mowing the same time, doing the same maintenance, almost around the same time. So I don't know if that would help.
Thank you, Joe. Does that sound like something that you could do, Rachel? Yes. Ian?
So, Rachel, on the Norwood Farm property that you own jointly with the Conservation Foundation, right? Who's responsible for the maintenance?
Yep. Land Bank does Land Bank property, Conservation Foundation does Conservation Foundation property, and there's a small area where occasionally it's easier for them to access our property when they're doing their mowing. So we actually have them brush cut a very small section of our property when they're doing their seasonal mowing, if they're in that one area.
So to the east of Almanac Pond Road, so the reason why I'm asking you, because I thought about this when I hiked in from the Pulpus Road parking lot, went south, you go over that pedestrian, bridge, and then the road curves around to the path curves around to the west, and there's been recent brush cutting to within 50 feet of a pond. And I was thinking, well, I wonder how that would fall into, I don't remember permitting it. And I maybe, my memory isn't what it used to be. And then I was thinking of that as a good example of maintenance. And so perhaps you can answer my question. Was that a permitted mow? Because I went online to look at Google Earth, and it shows on Google Earth that I was clearly all scrub oak when Google Earth went over and took a picture, and now it's been brush cut and easily within 50 feet of the pond.
So I'm trying to, thank you, Ian. I'm trying to envision where exactly you are to the east of Almanac Pond Road.
Yes, substantially east. So you're basically south of the parking lot when you walk out of the parking lot on the Pulpus Road. So then you can only go south, basically. And
Ian, I think you mean Alta Rock Road, not Almanac Pond Road. Almanac Pond Road puts you in the Winthrop Cranberry Bog if you're east of it.
Right.
well, I have the map right here. And so I'm talking about the eastern section where you approach it from the Pulpus Road, where you park on the Pulpus Road.
I know, Ian, Conservation Foundation has been doing a lot of habitat management right now and cutting out some scrub oak. So if Rachel has no idea what cutting you're talking about, it's likely the Conservation Foundation habitat management. Jeff?
Ian, if it's easier, if you have that on a map, if you just text me a photo of it or email it to me, I'm happy to figure out where it
Sure.
is and who's responsible for it.
Yeah, okay, thanks, I will. And I wasn't trying to blindside you in any way, Rachel. I was just, curious.
Sometimes it's private citizens too that have taken matters into their own hands for the pond. But if you send me where it is for exactly, Ian, I'll happily take care of it.
Yeah, I know a few years ago, some teenagers mowed down their own prom party spot. So it definitely is not always the landholders. Joe, you had your hand up?
Jeff, and you just took my thunder. A lot of people have been just going on to public property and cutting their own trails or Vista pruning for a deer or some wildlife. So it's getting a little bad out there as far as people going out and just cutting their own paths and just feeling it's town land and we can do what we want when that's not the case. In some places they're causing more damage and harm or erosion, and it's really become a problem. And I know if Cormac was here, he would echo the same problems that, it's going on. So.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue with that, you can call the police and they'll check out land bank property because it's public, but if it's Conservation Foundation, that's private property, so they won't go out and check it out to have it cease. So it can be difficult to track down. You have to be pretty persistent, unfortunately. Joe and then Jeff.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see a lot more motorcycle tires down like the path here behind you, Ian. I've seen motorcycle tracks rolling down there. So it's someone's going to get hurt here very quickly. They should be staying off some of the property. Stay on the roads, that's fine. But these single track paths and people are walking there all the time with their dogs, something's going to happen fairly in short order here, which is going to be a sad day.
Yeah. Jeff?
I know this sounds weird too. The other thing that I've run into a couple times where people have been concerned about cutting that ended up not being wetland issues. I've seen a few people that live out in more remote areas that are making their own copycat fire breaks from all the stuff that NCF has been doing kind of in the middle of the island, where all of a sudden they've been cutting big areas without knowing where it is because they're protecting their property from wildfires. And I've seen a handful of those copycats too. So there's all kinds of stuff running around for brush cutting right now. And it's some of it are wetlands and some of it's not. But again, if anyone ever has one, just send it in and we're happy to take a look and try to figure out what's going on and report it to whichever owner is involved sometimes.
Thank you, Jeff. It might be worth having, and I know we don't have like Conservation Foundation on here, but we do have a Linda Loring rep and Land Bank, but having our open space holders get together and put some sort of publication or document, like a guide to responsibly and safely using Nantucket's open space, and kind of highlighting some of the issues, appropriate ways to use trails, things that are not appropriate, to try and, again, just get everybody on the same page island-wide, I think would maybe help. Joe and then Rob.
Actually, I think that's a brilliant idea. One thing that Cormac did is Danielle Adele in his office, she runs the half marathon, and a lot of mountain bikers, road riders, she has emails for all of them. So I said, he called me about a trail one time, an illegal trail. And I just said, you should put out a blanket email, ask Danielle to share it. So that's one way that she got the word out. And if anyone's seen anything, call, etc. But I do think there should be some public advertisement or going on the radio or something to kind of stop this and because it's getting bad. So.
Yeah, and these are really good points because especially with COVID, it's not just a Nantucket problem. It's really open space everywhere. The national parks experienced it. So the public definitely needs that re-education on appropriate use. Joe?
Yeah, because Seth Kapistan was saying the same thing in Western Mass. They're having a lot of problems on their properties and they are concerned about what may be coming to Nantucket. So he may be someone to include in that conversation as well.
Yeah, definitely, as Audubon has public land holdings here.
Yes.
Rob, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here. I would agree. I'm speaking a little out of turn here, and Rachel might be able to fill in the blanks, but I'm thinking that Land Bank is coordinating this island-wide trail system through all the open space partners along with DPW. And I think that would be an ideal opportunity to spread that kind of message as the announcement for the island-wide trail comes out, to start to encourage people to participate in all of these various stakeholders' properties simultaneously. It seems like an obvious opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Rob. I'll go to Rachel and then Maureen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob, it's a great thing. I was actually thinking the same thing. That the Cross Island Trail and the Cross Island Hike are really good opportunities to educate the public about appropriate trail use. The other thing I just wanted to mention for Ian is that all of the Norwood Farm, both the Conservation Foundation and the Land Bank management that goes on our Norwood Farm property, which the Land Bank property is now renamed Beechwood Farm a little bit. Not a little bit, it is. It's not Beechwood Farm. So that might be a little confusing. But anyways, Beechwood Farm and Norwood Farm, all of that was permitted through Natural Heritage and through the Conservation Commission when those two properties came into ownership. So all of that management, we have a management plan. It's a little outdated through Natural Heritage, but it was permitted and it did go through the Conservation Commission, and Art Gasparo represented it at the time.
Thank you for clarifying that, Rachel.
And the only other thing I will say is that in my travels out in that area, I've happened to notice on the east of Almanac Pond Road, there was extensive clearing. And I actually called Karen Beatty about it, but it was not on public land, although some of it may have been on Conservation Foundation land. It was mostly a private homeowner. But if it went onto Conservation Foundation land, that's actually why I called her.
I can say that we have been on that site and are actively working with that homeowner to bring forward something to the commission. So we have been there as well. Thank
you. Maureen, and then we'll go to Seth.
Yeah, thank you. This is very, it's great to kind of see the cross-pollination, if you will, of everyone's thoughts about having people on island recognize their responsibilities towards the land. And I was wondering if it's something where we could get, the Inky to do an article about, things that you shouldn't be doing, like, doing your own brush cutting and why that's important, to have an informational article. And one of the reporters could just interview a few people and put something together. But I think, it's a good method for getting, people's attention as well. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Maureen. Seth, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the desire to have organizations talk more closely with each other to remind the public of their duties as responsible citizens. I know some of this has already happened with what Rachel and Rob mentioned with the Cross Island Trail, and also there was a West End trail map that was put out recently between Land Bank, Conservation Foundation, and Linda Loring Nature Foundation that has a section about how to appropriately use properties, as well as information about each property being different. They have different rules. So I think some of these things are already happening. I'm all for, putting out more educational materials. I do want to say though, I work at Linda Loring Nature Foundation. We have what some people would consider a large property, being 275 acres, but the Land Bank manages over 3,000 acres. The Conservation Foundation manages over 9,000 acres. With the staff levels they have, there's continually going to be issues. So it's important for when people to that see them to bring them up. But these things are perpetual. For a while, it was the issue of unpermitted dumping. And then the landfill said, we'll take, refuse for free, which is great, but people still dump. And then there's the issue of people cutting their own trails. The education is helpful, but people are still going to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. I know that that's true, but hopefully with education, it maybe empowers others to at least notice the bad behavior, to report it, where I think people don't even realize that they're walking past bad behavior sometimes. But yeah, I totally agree. It will continue. There's always that percent of the population that's just going to do what they're going to do, which is unfortunate. But any other commissioners' questions or comments on the land bank submission? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any comments from the public on this?
Nope.
Okay. So Rachel, because this will need to continue for natural heritage, are you wanting to continue until April 8th as well, which is next Thursday?
Yes, please. May I please continue 2 weeks beyond that to the following meeting?
Yeah,
Because I know we won't have made it to natural heritage by next Thursday.
Yeah, so I believe that meeting date is April 22nd.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll continue this until April 22nd.
So I was just going to throw out there too with this one. It seems like everyone is generally supportive of all of the concepts that are going forward, barring what natural heritage is going to do. I was going to suggest also starting, I think the orders for the two projects are going to look fairly similar for a lot of the structure of it, with a little bit of tweaking for each one, to maybe start looking at what the orders would look like for both of them as well. And it sounds like the DPW is probably going to be about 2 weeks ahead, but I don't think if the commission's interested, we can add it to the public meeting portion to talk about it in the drafts. And then if DPW closes, we can go forward. But I think if the land bank, even if it doesn't, to still discuss it under the orders, just to start looking at it. So we have some extra time crafting wise for making sure that everyone's conditions are in there if we're not missing anything.
Yeah, I think
Very
that's
helpful.
a great
Very
idea.
helpful.
All right, so we'll continue the hearing to the 22nd, but I'll put it on in the orders of conditions in the next meeting on the 8th, since we'll be discussing the DPWs then as well.
Yes, and Seth, you just put your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Jeff, and I apologize if I'm getting ahead of myself, but have you received any information either from Nantucket Conservation Foundation or the other landowners, large landowners that we've mentioned already, like Mass Audubon or the trustees, about similar submissions? Because we probably should get ready for those too at some point.
The only other group that's inquired on it at this point, and I know that I'm sure she's not at home watching intently, but I know she keeps an eye on it and talks regularly, is NCF has talked about doing something similar. I think the two differences are the land bank and DPW, I think, are somewhat more public as far as what's going on in public accessibility. And some of the projects that NCF is looking at are a little larger in scale, and they know those would have to be filed. But it is something that they are talking about. But I think they both wanted to see, NCF wanted to see how this completed and what it was going to look like. So that way, when they were putting together an application, instead of kind of having to build as we did with this one, they can say, all right, this is what's been permitted. This is how it's been permitted. This is the minimum level of information that we need to put together and how we're going to puzzle that out. So I think we're probably, once these conclude, probably at least a few months away from that, and haven't heard from TTOR at all. I think their property is a little unique in the sense that it's just the one. And then Mass Audubon was a little bit more passive as far as active land management goes right now. But we'll take them, and we're happy to help them and get them the information if people want to apply for similar things for large land ownership groups.
Thank you, Jeff.
Fortunately, we don't have very many.
That's a great question. So,
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, I didn't list off all the groups that might be relevant here, but I think that if they come in, then you can just keep us posted.
We'll even take one from Linda Loring.
I'm not going to comment on that right now, but
Don't go too far, Jeff, please.
So
all right. Well, we know there's potential in the future.
Well, the framework has been presented and prepared, and so it's a lot of guidance there.
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, this is a concept, and hopefully Rachel won't disagree when I say this. I feel like Rachel and I have been talking about a concept like this for a very long time, like a decade of talking about a concept like this for a while. So, and I know other places in the state have done it now too. And I think for these large land ownership groups, having permits like this is unbelievably helpful and useful because it takes away guesswork from people and it gives people, you know, training materials and understanding, and it introduces all the employees to, you know, environmental stewardship and what's expected. I think it's super helpful for everybody.
I agree, Jeff. I think this will be very positive moving forward. The sharing of information is definitely very helpful. All right, so with that, we'll move on. We don't have orders of conditions for these yet, so we'll move on to other business. We don't have minutes to approve. So monitoring reports, Jeff, do we have any? Okay, I don't know that any committees have met, but do we have any reports from CRAC?
No, we do not, Madam Chair.
All right, CPC,
Nothing to report.
NP and EDC,
Nothing to report.
okay. Commissioners' comments? Looks like no comments at this point, but we meet again on Wednesday, so that's pretty soon. Administrator staff reports?
Just two things really quickly. One, I did put a pack up for Wednesday's meeting with some of the comments and things that people that sent in before. I included also some comments the Land Council had sent in, and then I also included kind of a rough draft of that mobile gear discussion that we had last week. And I also included with that the original from Provincetown that has been adjudicated. So that's all up on the pack for Wednesday for that. And then the only other, I guess, good piece of news, and I know Rob and I were both excited about it, for those who missed it, is we opened Sacagawea Pond last Thursday. And finally, that pond was participant and decided to stay open for a good run. So it was open all through the weekend. It finally closed up. The last eyes that we laid on it open yesterday were about 6 p.m. and it still is flowing a little bit. And then I drew the short straw and I went out there this morning, and it had closed up from the end. So barring some sort of environmental reopening, we had a good full 3.5 day opening, which is above our 3-day target. So that is really good. The level of the pond has changed significantly, which is awesome. And hopefully we'll be asked there to do our water sampling post in a few more days once we let it stabilize a little bit. So hopefully we got some good water quality results as well. We're scheduled to do hummock next Monday. We do ask people if they do want to go out there while it's getting open to obviously be respectful of the people that are working and give them plenty of space and not get close to the machine that's trying to dig the hole, because he is not looking for you because he is working. But that's happened. And then we just had one quick question pop in on public comment, and I'll answer and then I'll stop. Bern Balkind asked what time the meeting was on Wednesday. That meeting on Wednesday is also at 4 p.m. So starts at 4, and hopefully we'll get a good couple hours in and have some productive discussion and move that forward a little bit.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark?
I wanted to thank Maureen and you, Jeff, for that article from the Cape Cod Times. That was fascinating reading. I hope you all have read it, but that's a very interesting article. Thank you for that.
think you'll have to see if I can get in. I hit my paywall with Cape Cod Times after my 3 articles, so I might have to wait.
I went ahead and blew the money for a subscription, and so far it's been very useful. That article has quotes, Seth Wilkinson and Greg Berman. There's just a lot of different areas. So it was very helpful to read. So
If people are having trouble with that paywall, I could maybe hit up Greg Berman and ask him if he could send us a copy of it since he's quoted it. We'll see. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, it might be worth
Or
trying.
Seth too. Yeah. I'll tell Seth that we'll hold all of his permits until he can get us a copy of the article. That's not true. I can't actually do that, or we'll do that. We get in trouble for that.
All right. Well, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously, and we are adjourned.
So just to let Joseph know, that wasn't a motorcycle that hit me. That was strictly my own error.
One is looking at the carnage.
Goodbye, everybody.
See you Wednesday.
Judging from those tracks, it looks like you were hit by an excavator.
Thankfully not, Terry. Thankfully not. Bye-bye.
See you Wednesday.